January 6th, described by everyone. Here's how the media described what happened that day.
That day will be another day that lives in infamy in American history, similar to Pearl Harbor and 9/11.
We can now add January 6th, 2021, to that very short list of dates in American history that will live forever in infamy.
The worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War.
150 days since the worst single act of political violence since the Civil War.
The worst attack on American democracy, arguably, probably since the Civil War.
The greatest attempted insurrection since the Civil War.
The 1/6 attacks are likely to kill a lot more Americans than were killed on the 9/11 attacks.
Though there was less loss of life on January 6th, January 6th was worse than 9/11.
For the record, we really try our hardest not to put liars, people we know who lie for a living, on television because it's irresponsible. Other channels do it every day. But because we're literal, let's go through the evidence here. Only one person was killed on January 6th, and that person was an unarmed female protester who was shot in the neck without warning by a Capitol Hill police officer who happens to have a publicly documented history of extreme recklessness. The protesters, meanwhile, killed no one. And yet they're telling you that those protesters were worse than the Imperial Japanese Army that attacked Pearl Harbor, killed thousands of Americans, and led to the Second World War, the biggest war in history. They're also, by the way, worse than Al-Qaeda. So as a talking point, as a political talking point, that seems a little, how do you say, over the top, actually kind of insane. But no, it's apt. Everybody argued that what we saw on January 6th was exactly like 9/11, Pearl Harbor, the Civil War, including a guy who writes popular histories for airport bookstores. He assured us that historically speaking, those comparisons are entirely valid. Here's that historian on NBC.
Think of the 6th of January if those terrorists who committed that attack on our Capitol had been a little bit faster. They could have and probably would have executed the vice president, executed the Speaker of the House, executed other members and leaders of Congress.
They probably would have. Therefore, they were as bad as people who actually did. Now, you look at that and you say, well, that guy's stupid, and that's fair, by the way. But then you look at 15 other guys just like him saying exactly the same thing, and you have to ask yourself, why are they all saying exactly the same thing? Maybe there's a purpose here. And that might lead you to ask, what actually happened? And how can we find out? How can we make up our minds for ourselves? It's clearly a significant day in American history. It's being used to change the country. So maybe we should get to the actual facts of that day. What are they? Well, it turns out the Biden administration didn't want to tell us what they were. They refused to release thousands of hours of surveillance footage taken from within the Capitol on January 6th. Why wouldn't they want us to see that? Well, we're not sure, but we know they really didn't want us to see it. In fact, they went to court to keep that footage under seal. In one court document, the Department of Justice argued that releasing that footage from January 6th would, and we're quoting here, compromise the security of the United States Capitol and those who work there. They went on to say that that footage might, quote, create a visual pathway where other bad actors could use in planning their breach point and pathway for future attacks. No word if ISIS-K was involved in those plans, or even if ISIS-K in fact exists. But that's not the point. The point is they can't let you see the video because it's just too dangerous to American national security. Keep in mind, the Capitol is a public building, which technically speaking you own. You've probably been inside because until the other day you were allowed to because it's your country, or was. So the idea that you're not allowed to see the inside of the Capitol is insane. The idea that the public has a clear interest in knowing what happened that day is real. So the footage we've seen up to this point, shot by journalists and citizens, contradicted the official storyline. Here, for example, was the Chewbacca guy wandering around the Senate. This is the dangerous terrorist. This is the Al-Qaeda operative. This is the Tojo of January 6th. Wandering around the Senate chamber looking a lot more like a confused street performer than a dangerous terrorist.
Hey, man. Glad to see you guys. You guys are patriots. Look at this guy. He's got covered in blood. God bless you.
Yes.
You good, sir? Do you need medical attention?
I'm good, thank you.
All right.
I got shot in the face. Where are they? I got shot in the face with some kind of plastic bullet.
Any chance I could get you guys to leave the Senate wing?
We will. I've been making sure they ain't disrespecting the place.
Okay, just want to let you guys know, this is like the sacredest place.
I know.
So you look at the guy in the Viking horns, the Chewbacca guy, and you may reach the obvious conclusion maybe psilocybin mushrooms aren't good for you. And that's fair. But no honest person could look at that video and decide America is under attack from terrorists. So then you have to ask, is that what the rest of the so-called insurrection looked like? Well, now we have an answer because a federal judge just rejected the Biden administration's strenuous attempts to hide the surveillance footage from January 6th. So footage was just released. It was obtained by BuzzFeed. It covers 15 minutes on January 6th from 2:25 p.m. to 2:40 p.m. Eastern. And those were key moments in the so-called insurrection. Now, right now, you're seeing images from a surveillance camera positioned at the entrance to the Senate wing of the Capitol. You don't see people hiding bombs or using bayonets or firing weapons, trying to take over the country in an insurrection. You see people walking around and taking pictures. They don't look like terrorists, they look like tourists. And all of them, by the way, are Americans. The rest of the footage, including shots from surveillance cameras outside the crypt at the Capitol, is similar to this. You can look it all up, by the way. It's online right now. And you should, because you will notice that contrary to what the Department of Justice, we're going to have to start putting air quotes around that, contrary to what DOJ claimed, none of the footage shows a secret route into the Capitol. Oh, that ISIS-K could use. So why did they keep this from us? Well, here's one theory. You could compare the footage that was released today with what Democrats showed us during the impeachment hearings earlier this year. Take a look at this. It is surveillance footage showing a squad of people dressed in all black systematically entering the Capitol and kicking open one of the exterior doors on the Senate side. These people appear to be well-trained and coordinated. They're not high on hallucinogenic mushrooms. The question is, who are they? And why don't we know their names? And why aren't they dressed like any of the other people in the footage that was just released? Remember, we were attacked for saying this, but we've already been vindicated for it. We still don't know how many federal agents were involved in the events that day on January 6th, but we have very good reason to believe from court documents that it's a significant number. And here's one clue. At a recent rally in Washington, the feds managed to arrest one of their own undercover agents. There were so many feds at the event that they lost track of each other and arrested one of them. So we ask once again, how many federal agents were there on January 6th? Why can't we know? What is clear is that once again, this footage reveals that the first draft of history was a total lie, an intentional distortion, a mirage created to control you. It was the work of a specific political party. It was the work of the Democratic Party. So it turns out the vast majority of people inside the Capitol on January 6th were peaceful. They were not insurrectionists. They shouldn't have been there. They weren't trying to overthrow the government. That's a total crock. And with that in mind, some of the other lies about January 6th start to make more sense. Do you remember this?
Officer Brian Sicknick died after being hit in the head with a fire extinguisher during the hours-long attack.
They beat a Capitol police officer to death with a fire extinguisher.
Officer Brian Sicknick died after being hit in the head with a fire extinguisher during the fight.
He died at the age of 42 after he was bludgeoned with a fire extinguisher.
So here's a rule of thumb going forward if you ever watch television again or read the newspaper. When they are absolutely insistent that you believe something, when they keep beating you over the head with the same talking point again and again and again, beware. There's a reason they're saying. When all of them are using exactly the same line, maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe it's coordinated. Maybe they're lying. In this case, they were lying. Brian Sicknick was not murdered. There's no evidence of that at all. The medical examiner said he died of a stroke. So the reason they told you that was because they wanted to establish a storyline before all the facts were in. That's a common theme for virtually everything that happens in the news right now, you will notice. Something happens, you're not exactly sure what the outline is, you don't know all the facts, nobody does, and all of a sudden they hang a story on it that helps them politically, and they ram it down your throat day after day after day.